Etymology and Elizabethan English connotations of sat at meat, Mark 2:15, KJV. I came across a King James, 1611, translation of Mark 2:15. And it came to pass, that, as Jesus sat at meat in his house, many publicans and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many, and they followed him. And was wondering why the Greek word kappa alpha tau alpha kappa epsilon sigma theta alpha iota, katakais tai, was translated sat at meat instead of reclined at table as in modern literal translations such as S. 2001. And as he reclined at table in his house, many tax collectors and sinners were reclining with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. Even the New King James Version, 1979, translated it as dining. Now it happened, as he was dining in Levi's house, that many tax collectors and sinners also sat together with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many, and they followed him. What is the etymology of the Elizabethan English connotations of sat at meat? Did meat imply that animal flesh was eaten, implying it's a major meal or feast? Did Shakespearean usage give us a clue what the KJV translators had in mind for the connotation assigned to the English word choice for kappa alpha tau alpha kappa epsilon sigma theta alpha iota in the Greek text used for Mark 2:15 by KJV translators?
Jesus is having a meal. When learning Middle English, the English that was common from about 1100 to 1500, just before the period we're discussing, I was taught to be skeptical of false friends, or lexemes that exist today in similar form but mean something different. Meat is one of these terms. Today it means the flesh of animals people eat, and that meaning goes all the way back to Old English. But before the mid-1600s, other meanings existed too, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. All food, sometimes as opposed to drink and sometimes a kind of drink, c. 1450, T meat shall be milk, oni, and amp, win. In F. J. Furnival, political, religious, in amp, love poems, 1903, 185. A meal, 1596, at sitting down and rising from meat, they give him thanks. Bishop W. Barlow, translation of L. Lavater, 3 Christian Serm. 3. 117. In this case, to sit at meat means to have a meal. See Def. I.3. A meal, a feast. Sometimes, spec. The principal meal of a day, dinner. Also in various prepositional phrases, mostly somewhat archaic. At, the, meat, at meat and meal, at table, at or during a meal or meals. Similarly after meat, before meat, to go to meat, etc. now archaic and regional. To sit is a common verb to use with being at a table, at dinner, and so on. To sit at meat would entail not necessarily a meal with meat, but at the least a major meal. The use of this phrasing may have to do with prior English translations of Mark 2:15. For instance, to sit at the meat is the phrasing used in the Wycliffe Bible, 1382, translation of Mark 2:15. And it was dune, and he sat at the meat in his house. Many publicans and sinful men sat in Togadir at the meat with Jesu and his disciples, for there weren't many that full Weidenheim. Source: Manchester University Digital Collections. This seems to be a translation of the Vulgate Bible's verb accumbere, literally to lie down but with a sense meaning to recline at table, Lewis in short, sometimes while eating. So the Wycliffe Bible, or maybe a biblical fragment before it, said the idea in English that Jesus was dining at a meal, and that sense persisted through the King James Version.
The basic question is really basic. Why the Greek word kappa alpha tau alpha kappa epsilon sigma theta alpha iota, katakestai, was translated not as reclined at table? It's quite simply a fact that reclined is not ever used in this way in English, and it is exceedingly likely that S is a corruption by dictionaries. The essential question for the real meaning of kappa alpha tau alpha kappa epsilon sigma theta alpha iota is better directed at Latin.se, but I will venture to say that existing etymologies of kappa alpha tau alpha down are at best doubtful, and that sigma theta alpha iota as a regular ending in Septuagint Greek would leave only kappa epsilon iota, which is really not much to work with at all. Chances are it relates to the analogy which has influenced the formation of the ending in the first place. A get-together, if you will. What is the etymology and the Elizabethan English connotations of sat at meat? Did meat imply that animal flesh was eaten, implying it's a major meal or a feast? No, not necessarily. The phrase is the same as sit at dinner today, given that meat meant meal in Middle English, cf. Mek me te 3. You already gave the Greek word, and you must be aware that the King James's translation is but a translation of collected works. Any inference from this to the original meaning is not warranted, at all, only to the extent that meat shares a similarity with meat, and middle, which recalls picom is greater than ancient Greek kappa alpha iota, though not, kappa epsilon iota, is lower than chi far as I can tell.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.